Unitarian Universalism draws from 6 diverse sources. And our 4th source explicitly references the Jewish and Christian teachings, acknowledging the liberal Christian roots of both Unitarianism and Universalism, which merged in 1961 to the Unitarian Universalism that we know today. And I would like to reflect some this morning on the tensions that are inherently underneath that 4th source, in particular the competing directions and how those 2 traditions approach the shared text that Jews call the Tanakh and that Christians call the Old Testament. On many Fridays and Saturdays, the Reformed Jewish congregation Kol Ami worships right here in this sanctuary. And if you ask Rabbi Dan for a copy of a Jewish Bible, you'll see that, of course, that Jewish Bible does not include the Christian New Testament. And the books are in a slightly different order, such as, for example, it doesn't end with Malachi, it ends with 2nd Chronicles, but the books are basically the same material. And although both Jews and Christians share that same Hebrew scripture, there are ways in which the Christian tradition in general and the presence of the New Testament in particular shape how Christians often interpret the Hebrew Bible, even though Jews and Christians are reading the exact same text. Imagine that instead of being here on a UU service for Sunday mornings, you were actually here in the sanctuary 24 hours earlier for one of Kol Ami's Saturday morning services. And a young woman who is becoming a bat mitzvah, a daughter of the covenant, ascends the steps to the bima, this platform, and reads the Haftorah portion, the part of the prophetic books, as opposed to the other reading from the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. She would read it in Hebrew and then translate it into English. So here now, this reading from the 9th chapter of the prophet Isaiah. There will be no gloom for those who were in anguish. In the former time, he brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the latter time, he will make glorious the way of the sea, the land beyond the Jordan, the Galilee of the nations. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in a land of deep darkness, on them a light has shined. You have multiplied the nations, increased its joy. They rejoice before you as joy at the harvest, as people exult when dividing plunder. For the yoke of their burden and the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor, you have broken as on the day of Midian. For all the boots of the tramping warriors and all the garments rolled in blood shall be burned as fuel for the fire. For a child has been born to us, a son given to us, and authority rests upon his shoulders. And his name is called, some of you may hear Handel's Messiah start echoing, Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. His authority shall grow continually, and there shall be endless peace for the throne of David and his kingdom. He will establish and uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time onward and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. Now, how might hearing those words from the prophet Isaiah on a Saturday morning as part of a Jewish congregation be different than hearing those exact same words read on a Sunday morning as part of a Christian congregation? And how might that different setting affect the direction in which that same text is interpreted? To explore these questions, I invite you to imagine something different. I imagine now that you are in the 8th century BCE, more than 2,700 years ago. You're in the ancient Near East, in the southern kingdom of Judah. You're part of the political elite in the inner circle of the king, who is a descendant of the house of David. And today you are hearing Isaiah of Jerusalem deliver a new prophetic oracle, one of the many passionate presentations that he has made to the royal court in recent years. At this point, there is no book of Isaiah. He's not dictating, thinking that there's going to be some future collection of what he said. You're hearing these words for the first time as they are being delivered live. You would catch all of Isaiah's poetic allusions. You're familiar with the intense pressure on your king, the king of Judah, to get involved with the recent Syro-Ephraimite crisis, when King Tiglath-Pileser III, who we affectionately refer to as TP3, when he invaded the territory of King Pekah of Israel, and Pekah, along with King Rezin of Syria, wanted your king to get involved with that skirmish. Assyria, think about, is the modern-day Iraq, and you can see parallels for the way that our own President Obama is being called to get involved and feels pressure to get involved in Syria, the same country, in Iraq, in other troubled regions. Turning back to the past, you have heard the prophet Isaiah address this political crisis many times. Isaiah is loyal to the kings of Judah, who are descendants of David, and he has been involved with lobbying the king to trust in divine protection. Listen to me, not to your military leaders. Obama has to wrestle with the same thing, right? Who in his cabinet does he listen to? Isaiah has been a strong advocate of non-interventionist, isolationist policy, and urging the king to rely on God and not become entangled in political alliances with the king of Israel and Syria against Assyria's TB3, Tiglath-Pileser III. Assyria is the great regional power at this time, and the verses we heard read earlier were from Isaiah chapter 9, and the first 12 chapters of the book of Isaiah consist of Isaiah's prophetic speeches from the time of the Syro-Ephraimite War and the corresponding reign of King Hezekiah of Judah. As an important figure in Judah's royal court, you would have heard Isaiah deliver all of those oracles live and in person as he attempted to influence the nation's defense policy. You would have known that Isaiah's references to Zebulun and Naphtali that sound so foreign to us today, those were the ancient tribal names of the areas that Assyria had recently captured. You would have recognized the Way of the Sea as an allusion to the region south of Mount Carmel, and the land beyond the Jordan as the regional coast of Galilee. Both of those areas had been recently captured by Assyria as well. Likewise, the name of Tiglath-Pileser III of Assyria, King Pekah of Israel, King Hezekiah of Judah, King Rezin of Syria, those would have been as familiar to you today, to the political elites in Isaiah's audience 2,700 years ago in the inner court of the king, as leaders in that region are to us today from the headlines. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, President Bashar al-Assad of Syria, former Prime Minister of Iraq, Nouri al-Maliki. Those names that are familiar to us today, those ancient names would have been equally as familiar. And Isaiah's references to all those intricacies of the Syro-Ephraimite crisis between Syria, Israel, Assyria, and Judah would have been like references we hear today to 9/11, to ISIS, to Syria and Iraq. The Syro-Ephraimite War and the surrounding political pressures and diplomacy were the defining geopolitical events of that day. And these events were part of the text and subtext of the speeches given by the political religious leaders at that time. Isaiah didn't know that his words would be edited and collected and come to be called Holy Scripture by a later people. He certainly didn't know that there would someday be another anthology of books called the New Testament that would again reappropriate and recontextualize his words. Isaiah was simply speaking as a Jew about the political situation in his day, in the 8th century BCE, to influence the immediate decision-making of the political elites. Isaiah's original purpose was to celebrate the birth of a new crown prince, who had been born not long after the height of that Syro-Ephraimite crisis in the 8th century. This new crown prince was another descendant of David and brought with him all the hopes that have always been associated with David's line. So with Saul and David and Solomon around the year 1000 BC, there was the united monarchy, but then it got split into the northern kingdom of Israel, the southern kingdom of Judah. Assyria came to destroy the northern kingdom of Israel over time. Babylon then came to power and took Judah into exile. So the hope in the Davidic line was the hope that this new crown prince would grow up to reunite the kingdoms of Judah and Israel, to reclaim the lands recently lost to Assyria, and reinstitute the golden age of the united kingdom of Israel as it had been under David 250 years earlier. That was the hope with which Isaiah sought to inspire the political elite of Judah 2,700 years ago. Hope in the face of fears of a warmongering king of Assyria and the resulting political pressures from the neighboring Syria and Israel. You need to come help us. But Isaiah knew that coming to the help of Israel and Syria meant that that would put them even more in the crosshairs of TB3. So he was seeking to speak hope in the future leadership of a newborn crown prince born 700 years before Jesus of Nazareth ever came onto the scene.